It's my privilege now to introduce our speaker this morning, Larry Gibson. He most recently has served as the stake president, followed by his calling to the Young Men General Presidency of the LDS Church. Larry received his bachelor's degree and master's degree in computer science and information from Brigham Young University. His professional career has spanned both corporate and entrepreneurial organizations. He started several technology companies and most recently worked as the senior vice president and CTO and CIO of the Fortune 500 corporation in the healthcare industry. Larry and his wife Shirley are parents of 6 children, including 5 Eagle Scout sons, and his daughter is married to an Eagle Scout. He recently received the Silver Buffalo Award as a Distinguished Eagle. He currently serves as Western Regional President. It's a great joy and honor for him to have him here from Salt Lake City this morning. Please join me in welcoming Larry Gibson.
I feel like I'm home. When I came here, we actually have a brief heritage in Colorado. I don't know that any of you know that, but my ancestors that ended up in Nevada, which is where I was born and raised, actually started as pioneers in Mississippi. And they were trying to figure out where they were going. They were supposed to meet another group on the trail headed out west. And by the time they got there, they never met them. So one of the trappers heading east said, "You better find a place to winter." And so they headed south and started a little community called Pueblo and lived there for almost a year and then ended up leaving at that point. When I look around Colorado, I keep thinking they should have stayed. But I was grateful for that heritage and to know that I'm at least a little part of you. What a great event to be here, and I want to express appreciation to Pete Coors for chairing this and putting this first of what we know will be many Duty to God breakfasts together, and also express appreciation to Doug Jones, chairman of the board, who's here, and also a marvelous Key 3 with Dave Steiner and John Cabiza and of course Jim Blair, who play an integral part of making this council what it is. But we know who really makes it what it is, and that's each one of you. And we're grateful for your commitment and your dedication and that which you do in behalf of these wonderful young men that we serve. I love scouting. I've been involved in it for a long time. It was mentioned that I have 5 sons that are Eagle Scouts. 2 of them are Scoutmasters right now, and the other 2 are at a higher level doing some things. And I have my son-in-law has been working with the 11-year-old Scouts for 8 years, and he just loves that experience. What they didn't tell you is of these 6 children, we now have just had announced by one of my sons that they're going to have another grandchild for us, which will make number 40. And of the, and I did it all myself. I have 3 grandsons that were just made Eagles recently, and I've got a whole slew of others that are on the trail to become Eagles, and then I've got all these granddaughters that are preparing themselves to marry Scout Eagles when that time comes. But I want you to know I've been in the thick of it. I have been through 15 Pinewood Derbies. And so I know, and I've done a lot of camping and other exploring as well. Well, this morning I wear the hat of Western Region President, and I want you to know we stand in awe of this marvelous council. I look at Denver and see the great things that's happening here, and I see the wonderful leadership, and I'm so impressed. And want to thank you on behalf of the Western Region Key 3 for the great work that you're doing and living out on the edge, stretching us and making us go farther than we need to. We know we've been in some very difficult times, and we've made it through those times very well, I think. But I think it behooves us to always, particularly at an event like this, because of our duty to God, to pray for that divine direction so that it'll manifest itself upon all those who have the weighty responsibility to lead this great organization as it needs to be led. We've got great leaders, we've got great vision, and I think about when I was in Philadelphia not too long ago, and I love visiting there, and I think about the Declaration of Independence that was written in 1776 and signed by all of those who signed it as really acts of treason in the process of doing so. And they were great leaders, and they had a vision. Then 1887, in September, when we got a new Constitution, which we understand is being questioned from time to time as well, and we're grateful for those dedicated people. It was during one of those times, after that was signed, if you go into those wonderful halls, you'll notice President Washington's chair. I don't know if you've seen his chair before, but on it, it's carved in the back, in the wood, it's carved, and there's a half a sun that's showing on that chair. And after they signed that Constitution, Ben Franklin said, "As I have often looked at that half sun on President Washington's chair, I could not decide whether it was rising or setting." And then he went on to say, after they signed it, "I now believe it is rising." And I believe that that's true with scouting as well. We've been through a bit of a rocky road, but I think we're in a position to rise like we've never raised before. And we certainly need to do that. It's a very important thing. I lived in England for 2 years, and of course, anytime you go to England, you want to go to Westminster Cathedral and want to be able to see where the founder, Robert Baden-Powell, was buried, which, is commemorated there. We know he's not buried there, but he has a commemoration there in Westminster Abbey. So I wanted to see that memorial honoring him. And it says, Robert Baden-Powell, 1857 to 1841, founder of Boy Scouts, friend of the world. I know he has blessed literally millions of young men. Every young man is looking, every youth, but every young man is looking for a brotherhood to belong to. And they're finding them in some places we don't want them to be found. And a lot of them are finding them in the places where they need to. If we ever needed scouting, this is the time when that's really true. Let me mention just 2 or 3 of my favorite quotes from Lord Baden-Powell that I think are important to us today here. One of them, in November 1920, he said, "There is no religious side of the scouting movement." You've all heard this before. He says, "The whole of it is based on religion. That is, service to God." In other words, duty to God. 6 years later, he was asked again, and he says, "I've been asked to describe in more detail what I had in mind regarding religion when I founded scouting. I have been asked, why must religion enter in? My answer has been that religion needn't enter because it's already inside. It is already the fundamental factor pervading scouting. Our objective is to bring about God's kingdom on earth, regardless of faith." And that's what this is about. That's what makes it such a differentiating thing. So if I think we were to ask him what our duty was, he would say, "We never fail when we try to do our duty. We always fail when we neglect to do our duty." But what was the first duty of scouting as far as he was concerned? Baden-Powell placed God first in all that he did. I was made council president of a council in Utah National Parks Council. At that time, we had 70,000 boys and about 40,000 adult leaders that were registered. It's now about 80,000, I think. But I was worried that we were kind of losing the focus on what I think is Lord Baden-Powell's first duty, which is duty to God. So I put together a team of people in our council. We had a Catholic representative, one from the Presbyterian faith, one from the Baptists, one from the Methodist faith. We put a wonderful rabbi whom I dearly love, and we had an LDS individual on it as well. We did a survey. And what we did is we took 13 things that we felt like were important things in scouting, according to their usual emphasis, such things like doing a good turn, being physically fit, duty to country, rank advancement, camping, knot tying, duty to God, and cooking and service. And we says, we'd like you to rank these 13 things in what you think is the order that they should be as far as scouting is concerned. We got 60% of those surveys back, which is phenomenal when you think about it. The results did not have duty to God first. It happened to be eighth. When something is eighth in a group of 13, I don't think it's exactly where Lord Baden-Powell would really want it. It's not what he would call the fundamental factor underlying scouting. Advancement, of course, was first, which is a very important thing. Many believe that it's the main goal, and that goal is to become an Eagle Scout, which I think is a very important thing for young men if we can. I want to commend these young men that receive these very special recognitions, which focus on them going the extra mile and focusing on their duty to God. The advancement process is a means to an end. It's not the end, and the most important end slipped, it looked like, at least from that survey, to eighth place, just below knot tying and cooking. So duty can be described in my mind as a force of feeling or a commitment of moral obligation. The commitment and moral obligation should really be the focus of our specific service. And how is this going to be done? How do we need to make sure that it's done for our young people? We need to get it into the hearts of these young men, that burning desire to actively do their very best, but they need to have an anchor to hang on to, and that's what scouting gives them. One of the merit badges that I just loved as a scout was reptile raising when I was young, 12 years old. I remember my mother and sisters loved it. I had snakes and I had lizards all over my bedroom in these little aquariums. It kept them out of my bedroom. But I didn't have my very own Gila monster. And so I was bound and determined one day I was going to go out and get my own Gila monster. So I grabbed my father's flashlight and a gunny sack and my little stick that I used to catch snakes and lizards and so on. And I headed out in Boulder City area where they had silver mines and gold mines and so on. And I knew a particular mine that I wanted to go to. We were told never to go in those mines. Well, I hiked for quite a ways out into the desert to this place where I knew that there had been Gila monsters spotted. And I remember looking around and waiting and hoping I could see one. And then after a period of time, I noticed one underneath a rock, just kind of sunbathing there in the shade. And so as I tried to sneak around to that, I could see a hole where there was actually a silver mine, and there was a little bit of track that went into it that I know they used the carts to bring the ore out. But I snuck around this particular boulder that he was hiding under in hopes that I could get to him quickly before he spotted me. But just as I got there, he spotted me, and he went shooting out on the other side of the rock and went into that cave. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go into that cave and get him. So I started walking in. I knew I had my father's flashlight. I started walking for what seemed like an eternity. There was this track that was going in that I was following. Then all of a sudden it opened up into a larger cavern, and the track went down the center mine tunnel and went on to the left and went on to the right. And so I thought, well, I'm going to have to go through them individually. So I started by going down the tunnel to the left. I got down there about halfway and seemed like I had gone quite a ways. Of course, I had my flashlight, but all of a sudden it got dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And all of a sudden it went out. I have never been in any place in my life that was as dark as that. The darkness was so thick I could feel it. And so I started trying to feel around, says, how am I going to get out of here? And I started feeling the walls and so on, and all of a sudden I lost feeling of the walls. So I dropped on my knees and was crawling around as best I could in hopes that I was going the right direction. I crawled and crawled and crawled in this thick blackness. Then all of a sudden, something came to my mind. You're not in here alone. There's a Gila monster in here somewhere. Then I didn't know really what to do at all, and so I started feeling around, and I was completely lost. I was never frightened so much in my life. And then I thought to myself, what's the best thing to do? And it came to me, I've got a God that I can pray to. So I said a prayer. And I asked if I could find my way out of this because I wanted to go back home. And that I could find my way out without finding that Gila monster before. And I started feeling some more, and I could tell I was kind of going around in circles or something, and all of a sudden I reached out and felt. And I felt something really cold. And I remember jerking my hand away, and it scared me to death. And then I thought for a minute, I felt again, and it was really cold. And all of a sudden I recognized it was solid. It was part of that track that I had found. So I grabbed a hold of it, and I said, good, I'm out. And I crawled and crawled and crawled, following along the track. And all of a sudden I kept feeling ahead to make sure that the Gila monster wasn't there. And as I felt ahead of the track, it came to an end. And I reached over, and there was a big void there where that was. In other words, I had grabbed the track, but somehow I had been completely turned around and had gone the wrong direction. And if I'd continued on, I would have been falling into this cavern. Who knows how deep it was. I went back years later, and it wasn't a very good place to have fallen off. But anyway, I turned around, crawled back out, and as I crawled and crawled and crawled, all of a sudden I saw this pinhole of light. And I was so grateful for it. As I crawled more and more, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And finally, it got so big, I went out of the entrance, and it was the sun, and I was in the light of a beautiful day. And I recognized that I had that anchor to hold on to, and I had a special light there that I could follow. That anchor, in my mind, is what we have in our scout oath and our scout laws. The light that was there was that heavenly being that we all worship, our God, who shows us the way and opens up, I think, a very powerful blessing for each one of us. Duty to God is living the scout oath and the scout law. I want you to know that I feel like we've got to teach these young people what it really means, the deeper meaning of what duty to God really is. You've all heard the story of that great actor, John Wayne, one that I really love. I don't know if you've heard the whole story. You've heard the things that he has said, but he passed away many years ago. He was one of my wife's favorite actors, and one of his last public appearances was a dinner, much like a breakfast like this. He was riddled with cancer and knew he was close to his death. I can relate in some degree with that because right now my dear wife is riddled with cancer. And we were told 8 months ago she only had 2 or 3 months to live, and now it's 8 months, and we know why. Because of many prayers that are being offered and many sacred blessings that are being given, the Lord continues to bless her beyond what the medical profession is saying. Well, here he was in that same boat. And I'll tell you, there's something that brings you down to your knees when you have those kinds of things. That's when you recognize what duty to God really is, that we need to connect with him because he is the only way, the only truth, and the only light that'll get us where we need to go. And you wonder what a man's going to say like John Wayne at a time such as that. Well, the purpose of this dinner was to purchase some land for a scout camp, which he knew was valuable for helping to teach young men because they need to learn these things out of doors. So at that dinner, Wayne recited the scout law. He then said the 12 points of the scout law. But then he said, those are nice words. Trouble is, he continued, we learn them so young we sometimes don't get all the understanding that goes with them. I take care that in my family, as each boy reaches scout age, I make sure he learns the scout law. Then I break it down for him with a few things I've picked up over the years since I learned. Now, I'm not going to go through all 12 of them, but let me just take the last one. He says, reverent. He says, believe in anything that you want to believe in, but keep God at the very top of it. With him, life can be a beautiful experience. Without him, you're just biding time. In other words, duty to God first. I was a slow bloomer as an Eagle Scout, but I became an Eagle. But I remember when I sent my application in and I got that letter back saying I needed to go to a board of review, I looked at the address. And it was someplace in Las Vegas, and they wanted me to take my parents with me. Well, that was 20 miles away, 23 miles away. And I wasn't sure I wanted to do it because I was older. When we drove up to the address, I found we were in front of the county courthouse. And we walked into the county courthouse, and someone was there to meet us, and they escorted us right into a courtroom. When I went in that courtroom, there was a judge in his black flowing robes sitting behind his bench, and 2 scouters on one side of him and 2 scouters on the other side dressed in their full uniforms. They escorted my parents to the jury box, and they put me where I was to present my case. They then quizzed me about my merit badges and many other things about scouting, and I knew I failed. They then released us, let us go into the hallway, while they determined whether or not, he said, I was worthy to receive the highest honor that Scout had to offer, the Eagle Award. Well, I remember pacing back and forth, and he says, come on, Mom and Dad, let's go home. I don't even want to stay around. I know I failed. I don't want to be here. But my dad says, no, you've come this far. You're going to stay. And so we stayed. All of a sudden, the door opened. They brought us back in, put my parents in the jury box, put me there to present my case. And after I stood there, the judge said, Mr. Gibson, would you approach the bench? Now, I didn't even know what that meant, but I did approach the bench. I didn't know any of these men. I'd never seen them before. But I did. And he says, we've gone over your material. We feel like your answers were good. We feel like your project was good and all the things that you've done in your paperwork. But we have 3 more questions we want to ask you before we determine whether or not you're worthy to be an Eagle Scout. Is that okay? I said, it's okay. Question number 1. Do you think you'll ever have to stand in a court of law like this again for having broke the Scout oath or the Scout law? I said, no. No, I don't. I never want to be in a court again. Number 2, do you really believe in God? And I said, yeah, I do really believe in God. I know that he's there. He says, good, that's the right answer. Then the last question, can you promise us that for the rest of your life, and he actually had me raise my hand to the square, that you will always, always do your duty to God first for the rest of your life? Now, up until then, I thought I was just going to get a little badge, call my Eagle, and I was done, and I was through. It wasn't until 6, 7 years ago when I was called in to do a charter review down in southern Nevada that I kind of told that story. And a federal judge happened to be on the executive board. He came up to me and says, you want to know who that was? I says, I'd love to know who that was. He says, that was Judge John C. Mowbray, a very strong and wonderful and faithful Catholic that asked you those questions. He was responsible for helping develop Gorman High School and some other things there. Later became Supreme Court Justice in Nevada. I was so grateful that that particular time, a message was given to me that was nothing more important that this organization has to offer that differentiates it from any other organization, youth-based organization, than the fact that as our foundation, we focus on duty to God first. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for your commitment to these youth because they need it. And thank you for being the wonderful, great influence for good that you are in the lives of so many. May the Lord bless each of us as we strive to bless them. Thank you.